Hi, I'm Sabrina Calloway. And I used to believe the worst betrayal in a marriage was infidelity. I thought if I ever found Derrick slipping out the door late at night, or whispering sweet words to another woman, that would be the end of us. But what I learned, the hard way, is that betrayal can wear 1,000 faces. Some smile at you over morning coffee, some manage your bank accounts. It started quietly, as these things often do, small fractures in the rhythm of us. Derrick had always been a man of patterns. Up at 6 a.m., coffee black, 2 sugars, a quick kiss to my temple, then off to the gym. Evenings were predictable too. News, dinner, a glass of scotch, sometimes two. I knew the shape of our life the way I knew the shape of my own hands. But then things began to shift. Subtly. He started skipping the gym, staying later at work. His texts thinned out, going from on my way to just silence until he walked through the door. And when he did, he'd offer a quick peck on the cheek, eyes elsewhere, his smile just a little too practiced. I told myself it was work stress. The markets were unpredictable. His clients were demanding. That's what he always said. And I believed him because it was easier than believing the alternative, that something between us was changing. But belief, I've learned, is just the first layer of denial. One night I caught him staring at his phone long after dinner. His thumb hovered over the screen, eyes narrowed, the glow painting hard lines across his face. I asked casually, "Everything okay?" He glanced up, startled, like I'd caught him in something. "Yeah, just a client issue." His smile was quick, too smooth. "Nothing to worry about." I nodded. Let it go. But that's the thing about noticing the cracks. Once you see one, you start seeing them everywhere. I watched as he started turning his phone face down every time he set it down. That wasn't like him. Derrick had always been open, careless even. His phone would buzz during dinner, and he'd glance at it without thinking twice. Now he shielded it, like it held state secrets. One evening, I walked into the living room and he was on the phone. His back was to me, voice low. I caught the tail end of a sentence as I stepped in from the hallway. "She hasn't noticed a thing." He stiffened when he saw me, forced a smile as he hung up. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Noah," he answered easily. "We're working on something for a client." Noah Whitaker, his business partner. I'd met him a handful of times. Smooth, polished, the kind of man who always seemed to know a little too much about everyone in the room. I wanted to believe it. I really did. But something in Derrick's tone, a little too smooth, a little too prepared, set off a quiet alarm in my chest. "She hasn't noticed a thing." The words echoed in my head long after the conversation ended. A week later, I decided to poke around. Not out of distrust, I told myself. Just curiosity. I logged into our shared bank account, the one Derrick always managed. I rarely looked. He was the finance guy. I was the nonprofit consultant. I trusted him to handle the numbers while I handled the heart. But as I scrolled through the transactions, that quiet alarm grew louder. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize. Not large enough to be alarming, but consistent. $800 here, $1,500 there. Enough to feel like something was bleeding out, slowly. I traced back 3 months. Every couple of weeks, money siphoned off into an account I didn't recognize. The name attached? Whitaker and Associates. Noah. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. I didn't confront Derrick that night, or the next. Instead, I listened. I watched. And I started to realize how little I actually knew about the man I shared my life with. It wasn't until a late night, when I woke to find Derrick missing from bed, that I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The house was silent. But in the office down the hall, light spilled beneath the door. I crept closer, barefoot against hardwood, heart pounding. His voice drifted through the crack. "We're close. She's still in the dark." I froze. Another voice, muffled through speakerphone, answered back. Noah's. I didn't catch the words, but I caught the intent. This wasn't about an affair. This wasn't about another woman. This was something deeper, darker. I slipped back into bed before Derrick returned, faking sleep as he slid in beside me, his breathing steady, calm. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a betrayal I didn't yet understand, but knew I couldn't ignore. What's worse, discovering a lie or realizing it's only the first layer? The morning after I heard Derrick's whispered conversation, I moved through the house like a guest in someone else's life. I poured coffee, fed the cat, opened the windows to let in the pale Chicago sun, but the warmth couldn't touch me. Derrick was already gone when I woke, his side of the bed cold. He'd left a note on the counter. Early meeting with Noah. Love you. 2 lines? Casual, routine. Except now, every word felt like theater. I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me, staring at the same string of transactions I'd found the night before. Whitaker and Associates. Small withdrawals, regular as clockwork, nothing that would raise a flag at the bank, but together, they added up. More than just numbers. A pattern. The nonprofit work I'd done for years had taught me that every financial decision leaves a trail. You just have to know where to look. And more importantly, what questions to ask. I stared at those transactions and asked myself the one question I hadn't let surface until now. What if Derrick wasn't just hiding an affair? What if he was hiding something bigger? I didn't confront him right away, not directly. I wanted to see how deep the hole went before I forced his hand. That afternoon, I called an old contact, Miriam Delgado, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on a financial abuse case years ago. Miriam had a sharp mind and sharper instincts. If anyone could make sense of a shadowy paper trail, it was her. When I explained the situation, I kept it light. "Can you take a look at something odd I found in our joint accounts?" I asked. Her voice softened. "You think something's wrong, Sabrina?" I paused, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup. "I don't know, but I need to be sure." Miriam promised to take a look, and I sent her the details, my heart thudding as I hit send. I told myself this wasn't a betrayal of Derrick's trust. This was self-preservation, due diligence. The words felt hollow even as I said them. Derrick came home late that evening. The moment he stepped through the door, I could feel the weight he carried. His shoulders were tense, his smile mechanical. "Long day?" I asked, careful, testing. He poured himself a scotch, ice clinking against the glass. "Noah's driving me crazy with a new client. They're restructuring some holdings." Holdings. He said it like the word meant nothing, like it didn't set off a fresh alarm in my chest. I leaned against the counter, watching him. "Everything okay with work?" Derrick nodded, too quickly. "Just stressful. Nothing to worry about." I pushed gently. "You've been distracted." He smiled, that same too smooth smile. "I'm fine, really." But he wasn't. I could see it in the way his hand tightened around the glass, the way his eyes flicked away from mine. For a moment, I almost let it go. Almost told myself I was overthinking, letting paranoia twist something harmless into something ugly. But then he said it. "You trust me, right?" It sounded innocent enough, a simple reassurance. But the way he asked, the way he needed me to say yes, made my stomach turn. I forced a smile. "Of course." The next morning, Miriam called. "I pulled the reports," she said, her voice clipped. "Sabrina, this isn't just small withdrawals. This is a laundering pattern." My breath caught. Through Whitaker and Associates? Through multiple shells, Derrick's routing money through Noah's firm into at least 3 different offshore accounts. I gripped the edge of the table, grounding myself. "Is there enough to prove it?" "Not yet," Miriam said. "But if I dig deeper, I can map the full chain. You're looking at serious financial misconduct here." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. This wasn't about another woman. This was fraud. That night, as Derrick laughed at the TV, scrolling through his phone, I sat beside him, pretending everything was normal. He had no idea I knew, and I wasn't about to tell him. Not yet. Because if I'd learned anything from watching him all these years, it was that timing is everything. And I wasn't ready to make my move. Not until I knew exactly how deep his betrayal went, and how to dismantle it piece by piece. How long can someone lie to your face before they start believing it themselves? I wish I could tell you there was a clear line between suspicion and certainty, that once I knew about the offshore accounts, the next steps felt obvious. But the truth is, betrayal sits like a stone in your chest long before the facts catch up. The morning after Miriam's call, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window at the garden Derrick and I had planted together. I traced the edges of the rosemary bush with my eyes, the one he'd insisted on adding, even though I hated the smell. Back then, I'd let it slide. A small compromise in the name of partnership. I didn't realize how many small compromises I'd made. Behind me, I heard the scrape of a chair. Derrick sat down at the table, scrolling through his phone, face illuminated by that soft, impersonal glow. His coffee steamed quietly between us, but he never touched it. Big plans today? His voice was casual, too light. It felt rehearsed. I smiled, thin, distant. Just a few nonprofit calls. You? He shrugged. Same. Meetings with Noah. The usual. Noah. His name used to mean nothing. Now it tasted like metal on my tongue. I wanted to ask him then, wanted to say, "What are you hiding? Why are you draining our accounts into places I can't see?" But that would have been too easy, for him, because Derrick was good at spinning stories. I'd heard it in his work, watched him win clients over with just the right mix of truth and omission. I needed more than confrontation. I needed leverage. After he left, I called Miriam again. "I need to know just how deep this goes," I said, my voice low even though I was alone. Miriam didn't waste time. "I ran the accounts through a deeper search. Derrick and Noah have been cycling funds through shell companies across 3 countries. They've been doing this for years, but the patterns accelerated in the last 6 months. Years. The word landed like a slap. I hadn't just missed a few warning signs, I'd missed a whole damn parade. "Why now?" I asked. "Why ramp it up?" Miriam hesitated, then said, "Could be prepping for something. Maybe a buyout, maybe an exit," I finished. The silence on the other end of the line said enough. That evening, Derrick came home earlier than usual. He smelled like his office, coffee and cologne, with a hint of exhaustion. But he smiled, kissed my cheek, poured himself a drink. "You seem tense," he said, leaning against the counter. His eyes scanned my face too closely, like he was looking for cracks. I forced a soft laugh. "Long day. Donor meeting fell apart last minute." He nodded, sliding into the role of supportive husband. "Want to talk about it?" I almost admired his commitment to the act. Almost. Instead, I shook my head. "No, it's fine. Tomorrow's a new day." He smiled, leaned in for a kiss, and I let him. Because even in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder, did he really think I was still blind? Or was this his way of testing how much I knew? After he turned on the TV and sank into the couch, scrolling through his phone, I sat across from him, tracing the rim of my wine glass. "Do you ever feel like things are changing between us?" I asked, voice soft. Derrick looked up, startled. He laughed, just enough to make it feel like I was being ridiculous. "No, babe. Why would you say that?" I tilted my head, studying him. "You've been distracted lately. Distant." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just work stress. You know how it is." I nodded. "Of course." Because that's what he wanted me to say. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and padded softly to his office. The door creaked as I opened it, but Derrick didn't stir. His laptop sat on the desk, closed but not locked. I knew the password. Our anniversary date. Ironic. I logged in, my fingers shaking, and scrolled through recent documents. Proposals, spreadsheets, emails. But one folder caught my eye. Personal holdings. Inside were files I didn't recognize. Investment records. Assets listed under names that weren't his but were clearly tied to him. And there it was again. Whitaker and Associates. And another name. Everest Holdings. I copied the files onto a flash drive, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake him. But he didn't move. He lay there, sleeping like a man with nothing to hide. I slipped back under the covers, feeling the weight of the flash drive beneath my pillow, and stared at the ceiling. The more I uncovered, the less I recognized the man beside me. The next day, Miriam confirmed what I already suspected. Everest Holdings is another shell. They've been moving money there from multiple streams. Is there enough to prove intent? Miriam paused. It's enough to raise flags, but we'll need more for leverage in court. Court. The word made my stomach clench. I wasn't ready to think that far ahead. But the path was clear now. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart. This was a war, and Derrick had already drawn the first line. I just hadn't realized it until now. What's harder, learning the truth or preparing for what comes after? Mornings with Derrick had always been familiar, predictable, comfortable, even when the comfort was built on silence. But now, every sip of coffee, every polite smile between us, felt like holding a live wire. He sat across from me that morning, scrolling through his phone again, a ritual I once thought was harmless. His thumb hovered a beat longer than usual, eyes narrowing before he slid the device face down on the table. I stirred cream into my coffee, my hand steady though the tightness in my chest grew heavier by the day. I'd found the offshore accounts. I'd copied the files, but proof wasn't the same as power. Proof was just the first step. Leverage came with timing. He looked up and caught me watching. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft, the kind of softness that masks calculation. "I'm fine," I lied, smiling back. But I wasn't. I hadn't been for weeks. I met Miriam later that day at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist, the kind of place Derrick would never step foot in. Too quaint, too casual. I sipped tea I barely tasted as Miriam slid a folder across the table. "I dug into Everest Holdings," she said quietly. "It's dirtier than I thought." I flipped through the pages, layer after layer of shell companies, loopholes, aliases. Derrick's name didn't appear anywhere outright, but the ties were undeniable. Transfers from joint accounts, signatures that matched his, whispered fingerprints in all the right places. "This isn't just protecting assets," Miriam said. "This is preparing for something big. He's moving money, Sabrina, and fast." I swallowed hard. "How long do I have?" Miriam's eyes softened, but her words didn't. "Not long. If he files for divorce first, he could argue these moves were all part of a larger business plan. You need to act." I pressed my palms flat against the table, grounding myself. Act. But act how? That night, Derrick was unusually cheerful. He ordered takeout from my favorite Thai place, opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving, played the role of the attentive husband with such precision it almost broke me. He poured me a glass, clinking his against mine. "To us," he said. The words felt like a mockery. "To us," I echoed, forcing a smile. I watched him laugh at something on TV, his posture relaxed, his breathing steady. And I wondered how long he'd been rehearsing this role, how long he'd been building a life I wasn't meant to be part of. The next day, Derrick struck the first real blow. I was in the middle of drafting a grant proposal when my phone rang. Margot, a close friend and board member at the nonprofit where I consulted. "Sabrina, I don't know how to say this." Her voice shook. I sat up straighter, heart dropping into my stomach. "What is it?" "There's talk about you, about the nonprofit's finances. People are saying there's mismanagement." The room spun. "Margot, I know it's not true," she rushed to say, "but it's spreading. Derrick's been mentioning things to donors, to mutual contacts." My throat tightened. He wasn't just planning to leave. He was dismantling my reputation. Quietly, strategically. "I'm so sorry, Sabrina," Margot whispered. "I just thought you should know." When Derrick came home that night, I watched him move through the house like nothing had changed, like he hadn't just set fire to my professional life behind my back. I waited until dinner, until the dishes were cleared and the wine glasses refilled. "Derrick," I said, voice steady but low, "is there something you need to tell me?" He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "About what?" I stared at him, long enough to let the silence speak. "You've been talking to people. About me. About the nonprofit." He blinked too quickly, then shrugged. "Just trying to help. I've heard whispers, that's all. Figured I'd get ahead of it." I leaned forward, every muscle taut. "Get ahead of what?" His smile flickered, just for a second. "You've been stressed, missing details. I thought maybe people should know it's not your fault." Gaslighting, plain and simple. Make me question myself before I could question him. I forced a calm I didn't feel. "I appreciate your concern," I said, standing to clear the plates. "But I'll handle my work, Derrick." His jaw tightened, but he let me go. For now. I met Miriam the next morning with my mind made up. "I'm moving the assets," I said. "All of them. Today." She nodded, her expression grim but approving. Together we opened a trust under my name, rerouting every dollar I could access legally. I froze joint accounts, flagged transfers Derrick hadn't completed yet. The forensic trail was on my side. I wasn't stealing. I was reclaiming what was mine. That evening, Derrick came home, kissed my cheek, poured himself a drink. I watched him, waiting for the moment he noticed. It came late, as he checked his phone, scrolling through account balances. His expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around the glass, knuckles white. "You okay?" I asked, voice light. He smiled thinly. "Fine. Why wouldn't I be?" But I saw it. The first real crack. How do you confront someone who's burning down your life with a smile? The first shot came quietly. I was halfway through reviewing a proposal when my phone buzzed. The message was brief, clinical. Formal notice of legal action. Derrick had filed a motion against me, accusing me of financial mismanagement, embezzlement, and intent to defraud. All wrapped neatly in legal jargon meant to disorient. I sat still for a long time, staring at the notification, feeling the edges of my world tilt. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it confirmed something deeper. Derrick wasn't just leaving me. He was willing to destroy me to win. I forwarded the notice to Miriam and our attorney, Patricia McAllister, a woman known for dismantling cases like Derrick's with surgical precision. Moments later, Patricia called, her voice steady, sharp. "We've got a fight on our hands," she said without preamble. "But don't panic. His claims are built on sand." I pressed a hand to my chest, grounding myself. "He's accusing me of stealing my own money." Patricia's tone didn't waver. "It's a tactic. He's hoping you'll break. He knows if he drags this into court long enough, you'll either settle or collapse." I inhaled slowly. Settle or collapse. Two choices Derrick had likely bet on, but he'd miscalculated. There was a third option. The second shot wasn't as quiet. It came through mutual friends, filtered back to me in whispers and half conversations cut short when I entered the room. Derrick's narrative had spread, that I was unstable, paranoid, that the money I'd moved wasn't mine, that I'd manipulated him financially for years. I could see it in their faces, the doubt, the curiosity. People I'd laughed with, worked alongside, now watching me like a story unfolding in real time. Margot called late one evening, her voice tight with guilt. "I've tried shutting it down, Sabrina," she said softly. "But he's everywhere. Drinks with donors, little comments, just enough to plant seeds." I closed my eyes, feeling the burn behind them. A war waged in whispers, where the battle wasn't just over money, it was over who people believed me to be. "He won't stop," I said, my voice flat. "No," Margot agreed, "but we can fight back." I wished I believed her then. Patricia met me in her office 2 days later, a stack of papers spread across her desk. "He's filed for a forensic audit," she said, pushing the documents toward me. "He wants the court to believe you've hidden assets, falsified records." I traced the edge of the paper, feeling its weight in my hands. Derrick's plan wasn't about proving anything. It was about grinding me down, making me spend every ounce of energy defending myself until there was nothing left to reclaim. "He's hoping I'll wear out," I murmured. Patricia's eyes met mine, sharp as glass. Let him hope. That night, Derrick was unusually composed, almost gentle. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, the air between us thick with everything unsaid. He glanced at me over the rim of his glass. "I filed today," he said, voice smooth, casual. I didn't flinch. "I know," he smiled faintly. "It's nothing personal, Sabrina. Just business." Business. I let the word hang between us, a chasm neither of us could cross anymore. "You've always been good at playing the victim," he added, his tone light but cutting. "But you can't win this one." I leaned back, my heart pounding hard enough to make my fingertips tingle. "You think this is a game?" He tilted his head, eyes gleaming. "Everything's a game, and I know the rules better." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Then you should know I never play without an endgame." For the first time, Derrick's eyes flickered. A beat too long. A sign he wasn't as sure as he pretended to be. The following week was a blur of legal preparation. Miriam and Patricia worked around the clock, gathering the financial trail I'd unearthed, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the ties between Derrick and Noah. We met in Patricia's office, reviewing line after line of financial records. Miriam pointed to one entry, her finger steady. "This is the one that cracks it," she said. "A transfer from Whitaker and Associates to Everest Holdings, disguised as a consulting fee, but routed through Derrick's accounts." Patricia nodded, her gaze sharp. "It's enough to request a dismissal on the audit and turn the motion back on him." But I couldn't shake the weight pressing on my chest. I'd spent years trusting Derrick, letting him handle the numbers, while I focused on the heart of our life together. And now, those same numbers were my lifeline. Miriam caught my eye. "You're doing the right thing, Sabrina," she said gently. "You're protecting yourself." I nodded, my throat tight. Protecting myself wasn't something I'd ever thought I'd have to do from the man I married. The night before the first hearing, I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at the reflection in the mirror. My face looked unfamiliar, drawn, tired, sharper than I remembered. Derrick passed by the door, pausing. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. I turned, my voice steady. "I do." He smiled, that soft, insincere smile I knew too well. "You'll regret it." I held his gaze, feeling the last thread of us snap. "I already do." Sometimes the hardest battles aren't about proving the truth. They're about holding on to yourself long enough to fight for it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. A place built for order, but humming beneath with the chaos of lives unraveling. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly in my lap, the texture of my blazer sleeves rough beneath my fingertips. Across the aisle, Derrick adjusted his tie, that familiar smugness stitched into every movement. He glanced over at me once, eyes cool, unreadable, like this was just another negotiation. But this wasn't business. This was my life. Patricia leaned in, her voice low but certain. "Let him perform. It won't hold." I nodded, anchoring myself in her steadiness. I wasn't just here to defend myself. I was here to end the game Derrick thought he controlled. The hearing opened with Derrick's lawyer. Polished, sharp, every word calculated. He painted me as unstable, erratic, someone who manipulated finances behind Derrick's back. "She moved significant funds without her husband's consent," the lawyer said, his voice smooth, steady. "Funds Derrick rightfully had access to. This is a clear case of financial misconduct." I sat still, my breath measured, every muscle locked against the urge to speak. Not yet. When Patricia stood, her presence filled the space. She didn't posture or raise her voice. She simply placed a thick folder on the judge's bench and began to unspool the truth. "The funds my client moved," she said calmly, "were assets she earned and protected from imminent exploitation. We have documentation that Derrick Calloway rerouted joint funds through unauthorized shell companies, including Everest Holdings and Whitaker and Associates, entities designed explicitly to hide assets." The judge frowned, skimming through the pages. But it wasn't just about paper. It was about intent. Miriam took the stand next. Her tone was clinical, but her words struck like a hammer. "These transfers weren't accidental," she explained, pointing to highlighted statements. "They followed a pattern consistent with financial abuse and asset hiding. Each transaction was routed through Derrick's known business partner, Noah Whitaker, and ended in offshore accounts." Derrick's lawyer objected, claiming conjecture. The judge waved it off, eyes narrowed as they reviewed the evidence. Derrick shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. For the first time, he wasn't leading the narrative. When the judge turned back to us, there was weight in their expression. "The financial evidence provided," the judge began slowly, "contradicts the plaintiff's claims of misconduct. The court sees no grounds for a forensic audit of Mrs. Calloway's finances." I exhaled, feeling the release like a thread snapping inside me. But the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," they added, eyes landing on Derrick, "the court finds sufficient reason to believe Mr. Calloway has engaged in deliberate financial obfuscation. Legal fees incurred by Mrs. Calloway will be covered by Mr. Calloway." The gavel fell, solid and final. Derrick's mask didn't crack, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Outside the courtroom, the air tasted different, lighter but tinged with exhaustion. Patricia touched my arm gently. "That's the turning point," But it's not over. I nodded, knowing she was right. Derrick wouldn't walk away quietly. Men like him never did. And yet, I felt something settle in my chest, a steadiness I hadn't known I'd lost. That evening, back in the apartment that still held both our names, Derrick poured himself a drink without a word. The clink of ice against glass felt louder than the quiet between us. He turned, leaning against the counter, his gaze cutting but controlled. "You won't win everything," he said softly. "You know that, right?" I met his eyes, the weight of the courtroom still pressing against my spine. "I already have," I said simply. His jaw tightened. For the first time, I could see the cracks beneath his performance, the unraveling edges of the man who'd once seemed unshakable. He downed his drink and left the room. In the weeks that followed, the divorce proceedings accelerated. Derrick tried to salvage what he could, negotiating, threatening, spinning. But his leverage was gone. Patricia filed for final asset division. I kept the condo, my retirement funds. The nonprofit ties remained intact. Derrick's shell companies were exposed. His standing in the financial community? Fractured, though he worked hard to mask it. It wasn't a clean victory. There were scars. There always are in wars like these. But I wasn't broken. And I wasn't afraid anymore. What's left of a man when the lies he built his life on start to collapse? There was no gavel at the end. No grand moment. No dramatic closing arguments. Just a quiet afternoon in Patricia's office. The smell of coffee and ink lingering in the air as I signed the final set of documents. The divorce was finalized. The terms were clear. I kept the condo, my retirement, my financial independence. Derrick was left to untangle the mess of shell companies he'd built, his reputation fraying at the edges with every closed door in his professional circle. Patricia slid the papers across the desk toward me, her expression softening for the first time in weeks. "It's done," she said. I ran my fingertips along the embossed edge of the decree, tracing it as though it would leave some kind of mark on me. But all I felt was space. Not the crushing silence I'd feared, but a relief so deep it didn't need sound. Patricia leaned back, studying me. "How do you feel?" I gave a soft laugh, not quite knowing the answer. "Not victorious exactly, but whole." She smiled, nodding. "That's enough." I walked out of her office into the Chicago spring, the city vibrating with life, people rushing to meetings, sipping coffee, laughing into phones. The world hadn't stopped for my unraveling, but that no longer felt cruel. It felt liberating. I stopped at a street vendor and bought myself a single tulip, deep red, the kind Derrick would have found impractical. I held it like a trophy, small but mine. The final act came a week later. Derrick requested a meeting. No lawyers, no paperwork, just us, in the cafe where we'd once celebrated anniversaries. He arrived late, as always, wearing the polished armor he never seemed to shed. His tie was loose, but his smile was tight. I wanted to say... He hesitated, reaching for words he probably hadn't rehearsed. "It didn't have to be like this." I sipped my tea, calm. It did. He leaned forward, dropping his voice. "You think you've won, but..." I shook my head, cutting him off softly. "There's nothing left to win, Derrick. You lost long before the court said so." His jaw tightened, the words dying in his throat. "I didn't destroy you," I continued, voice low but steady. "I didn't need to. You did that to yourself." He sat back, silent. I stood, leaving the half-full cup on the table. "For what it's worth," I said, pausing at his shoulder. "I hope you figure out what's left of you." I spent the evening on my balcony, the city lights shimmering beneath the dusk. The condo was quiet, finally mine in every sense. I turned on music, the jazz I loved but Derrick had always dismissed, and let it fill the space. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't mourning. I was simply being. When I think about what happened now, I don't feel rage. I feel clarity. Derrick tried to strip away my independence, my dignity, my voice. But what he never understood was that freedom isn't something you can steal. It's something you reclaim. Not with fireworks, not with vengeance, but with a pen and a signature that says, "This ends here." Sometimes the quietest victories leave the loudest echoes. If there's one truth I've learned from this journey, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. how you rise from it does. I faced a man I thought I knew, and I discovered strength I never realized I had. Protecting your peace, your worth, your future, those aren't selfish acts, they're survival. And sometimes the quietest choices, the ones no one sees, are the bravest. I wonder, have you ever stood at a crossroads where walking away was your loudest statement? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if this resonated with you, drop a comment or tell me where you're tuning in from. And of course, if you'd like more stories that remind you your voice matters, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. More quiet victories await.